Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Blue Dragon 5 here.
And Rohit Dar.
And folks, we're talking Blue Beetle, the new DC movie release that's come out. It's been on quite the journey because I remember back when there was talk of it just going straight to HBO Max, then it didn't, and then there's all sorts of talks of like how this fits into the DCU going forward cinematically. So all that put to the side, we're here to talk about the movie itself and see what kind of comes up amongst the conversation. We invite you, dear viewers, to comment your thoughts and your feelings on Blue Beetle. And also, again, I'm unsure where the status is of it right now, but also, we support the people, the writers during the strike, and the writers, and I guess the actors as well. So just kind of putting that out there too. So of course, support the strikers, assuming the strike is still going on, which I am inclined to believe it still is. Okay. Yes, Kogias in the comments right off the bat. Hi, I thought Blue Beetle was pretty good. Okay. So, Rohit, what say you?
I'll concur with Kogias. I thought Blue Beetle was a pretty good superhero movie. I think the marketing. I was interested in watching this film. There's just a lot of elements that were appealing for me from my particular sensibilities. One, I'm always down to watch coming of age, like young teen, movies with young teen characters, just trying to make their way in the world. Two, I Joel Madrona plays one of my favorite characters in Cobra Kai, and I genuinely like as an actor, both his performance in Cobra Kai and just what I've seen in interviews outside of related to Cobra Kai leading up to this movie. And third, I think Blue Beetle is kind of just specifically the Jaime Reyes version. I only was first introduced to him in Young Justice, in season two, where he takes a prominent role, and he was a cool character there. And in the marketing, I was very interested to see like how Jaime Reyes was to lead his own movie in his own world, and especially the family. And overall, I really do appreciate how much the movie really centers on Jaime's connection to his family, and the city of Palmettos is like very well developed. It has kind of a unique Miami slash Puerto Rico vibe. Um, and the suit just like looks straight off the page. I think it's probably the best way I can see the suits be adapted into live action. The action scenes are fun. They're really it's at a good pace. The humor's on point. I think easily the highlight of the movie is George Lopez's performance as Uncle Rudy. He steals the show. I think overall this movie is really fun. It surprisingly goes into certain topics or areas of history and geopolitics, especially in relation to Latin America. That was a prize for it to touch. It does. It doesn't. I don't feel like it's brings the movie down, but it's nothing too light. They don't make light of it. It comes up in a substantive manner, and I think where things end off for Blue Beetle, I'm excited for you know Joel Marduena, his character, as well as the supporting cast to really be ported over to the DCU because I think they fit well, and just the overall vibes is very much. I think how one person described it when I was watching a video, making an analysis, but as it's a really sincere, simple, straightforward superhero movie, and I think for people that miss that for in sort of this era of cinematic multiverses and film and TV and whatnot, I think this is a really like even though some people may think that it's a reductive comment, I think it's a simple, solid superhero adventure that doesn't reinvent the wheel, but uses the wheel well. And I think a lot of it comes down to the specific cultural background of Jaime Reyes and his family, and just the overall charisma and charm and sincerity of the actors among the cast. I think probably the biggest weaknesses is probably the villains and being really thinly designed, but I think they're as thinly designed as like typical superhero movies are. And so far, as so long as the superhero and the supporting cast, carries the weight of the movie, I can, forgive not so well, fleshed out or really captivating villains in this movie.
Okay, yeah. For me, So I went into this familiar with Blue Beetle's prior adaptations. Again, I'm not really a comics guy with Blue Beetle. I've seen kind of the media adaptations and kind of the I mean, sorry, specifically Jaime Reyes, but a little bit. I got a little bit of Ted Cord here and there, usually in conjunction with Jaime Reyes, and occasionally some fan films on Blue Beetle, and obviously, Blue Beetle being kind of in connection with you know uh, Owlman from Watchmen is kind of well more so. I mean, Owlman being a response to Ted Cord Blue Beetle, so it's kind of funny how that works out. Anyway, but yeah, so I've seen as kind of the comments have kind of highlighted here, like Code Geass says, I mostly just knew Blue Beetle from Batman Brave and the Bold, so I had to do research to understand the character better. Yeah, that's the thing for me. I'm pretty sure the first time I ever saw Blue Beetle was Jaime Reyes, and it was from Brave and the Bold, and I really liked him there. And we have, if memory serves, Will Friedle playing Blue Jaime Reyes there, and he was delightful. And we had that, and then we would have Young Justice, probably with one of the best takes on Blue Beetle in terms of had the most interesting arc in which we did the full thing from the comics with the Reach. It sounds like, and again, I can't speak to what the comics did, but from what I understand, they kind of pulled a lot from that and they kind of applied it to Young Justice for a season, and it was pretty solid. So, so here and there, I've seen Blue Beetle brought into things, and also like the DC and continuity-driven films with, I believe, it was Teen Titans specifically. They kind of worked him into some of those as well. Point being, Blue Beetle is an interesting character. I think I do think that character shows a lot of great potential, and I was very hyped for Zolo because again, I too love him in Cobra Kai. So I was like, oh my god, that's great casting. And a fun fact, um, back before the big shakeup in hierarchy and before HBO Max was like cutting costs like left and right. Apparently, there was talks of this of a DC showcase show, which I believe was going to be in live action. And yes, Rohit, could you shut off the Discord, please?
Yeah, I got
Thank you. Anyway, what was I going on about? Oh, right. So yeah, Kevin Smith was working on this showcase thing. He was just going to do like an episode of Showcase. It was going to be essentially about Jimmy Olsen and Perry. It was going to be about the characters that are not like necessarily our top tier characters, but kind of exploring them from a different venue, and it was going to be from a different angle. And you would have had Zolo playing Jimmy Olsen. You would have had John Goodman as Perry White, and you would have had potentially Nicolas Cage as Bizarro Superman.
that would have been an interesting voice cast.
Yeah, that's well. I'd say it might have been. It sounds like it might have been live action, but we don't know. I mean, it sounds like more practically would have been animated, but
Yeah.
it is unclear. It's unclear what the parameters would have been for this. It was very sounded really too good to be true, but it was somewhat in development. Anyway, point being, we've been trying. It sounds like we've been trying to get Zolo into the DC universe for a time now, and we finally done it. There's a perfect role for him. My optimistic hope, admittedly, was that we are going to have a little bit of a little more Ted Cord in the mix. Now, I know obviously with the story of Jaime Reyes, Ted Cord can't really be there for that to work, or at least not necessarily would he have to be there. At the very least, for the origin story, he's not there, being the point. Like we have a new Blue Beetle, but still, I kind of wish we kind of like set up the legacy a little earlier in the movie and stuff, which we do a little bit of, which I'm appreciative of. But I'm a little well, I was just hopeful that we would have like seen him in the costume doing stuff, maybe in like the flashback or like how the movie opened or such.
So, just to clear, so in regards to sort of that particular point, in the comic, like when Jaime Reyes, first introduced, there's really not a specific connection to like Ted Core Blue Beetle. Like they're like the scarab lands in his hometown, he
Yeah,
gets with it and all that. And really, I think the only characters from the major DC universe that come to interact with Jaime Reyes is um, like a plainclothes peacemaker and Guy Gardner. And Guy Gardner is the one who makes mention of like Ted Cord and Val Rice is his
no, I know that. I'm not saying that we needed Ted Cord to interact with him in the movie. I'm just saying if we like set him up in the lore of the thing instead of just seeing the Beetle cave, essentially. That's all I'm saying. If we could have seen the guy like in action in the suit, at least in flashback or something.
I figure it's likely the case that you know before you know all the changes that went about, if this movie were to have gotten a sequel, that's probably where they would flesh it out more.
Yeah, assumedly, yeah. So that's the thing. So again, I'm saying it was just a hope that it was a long shot, but it was a hope that maybe we'd see some Ted Kord stuff going on. At the very least, see the guy who played Ted Kord even minimally
Mhm.
in the film. I remember back there was like some speculation of Jason Sudeikis playing it, which I was really hyped for, but obviously I think that was kind of quickly dispelled. But
Yeah.
anyway, let's see. So point being, there was loads of back and forth, and still arbitrary. It sounds like if this is people have been asking James Gunn things left and right lately, and no one can get necessarily a consistent answer. They're getting answers, and they're getting direct answers, but they're not quite asking the right questions, or at least like it's almost like you have a genie and you're asking for the wishes, but you're not being uber specific with the wishes. You know if that
I mean, I think really in regards to this movie, for any questions that James Gunn is being pressed upon, I think it's really internally to probably just wait and see, depending on
yeah
how the movie performs. And I think with the fact that the movie's not doing well box office wise, but critically, it's like a 78%. It's certified fresh. That hasn't happened for a DC EU movie in a while.
yeah
I
yeah
feel like I feel like James Gunn will look at that and see how people react, and maybe I don't know, maybe like maybe Joel might not return in the sequel in the DCU, but maybe he might be part of like a Teen Titans team, or maybe part of the Justice League, or like a supporting character. Like I think these characters like have been relatively well received, and I think likely merit some continuation in one form or another.
yeah. So the film itself for me though, that was all just kind of my stuff going into it. So the film itself, I think the film is okay. I think it's close to being some. I think it's fun, but it was close to being something like really, I think really fun across the board. In terms of I think it was close to being like exactly the win that DC needed right now. Where I think right now it's like it's kind of scraping by in terms of like this was fun. It was kind of a palate cleanser. It's not really getting it's not really it's not the rock in which we build the church upon going forward. But it's okay. That's kind of where I'm at on. There are a lot of elements in this movie I do like.
Mhm.
But however, I don't know. I'm not really. Usually, my counterpart Tiki would usually kind of rants about the tone and stuff. And I'm not saying he's not validated and he's not justified in sometimes having that point. But this movie it was very apparent to me. We have a lot of tone shifts, and I'm unsure about them. I'm not saying in real life we can't have tone shifts, but it just feels when I'm watching the movie and I'm really getting into the drama, and then we're kind of like we're kind of sprinkling some maybe some comedy we don't need in certain places. I don't know. It just feels like, on the whole, like we have that, and we've also kind of dumbed down some of the really interesting ideas, or so there's might be some missed potential here and there. It just feels, on the whole, it does work. This is not a bad movie. It does work. I think it's got some solid ideas, but I just kind of wanted to see these seeds kind of like kind of grow in the movie. I wanted to see more. So I guess the better way of putting it, I wanted to see certain ideas flourish in a way I don't think they fully did. And I'm not expecting them to reinvent the wheel on this, okay? Because I know a lot of people going into this are saying like, oh, it's just Iron Man or it's just Green Lantern again, or it's just this, or it's just that again. I understand that. There's an origin story. Sometimes there's only so many times you can reinvent the wheel on that. But
Mhm.
I just I just kind of wanted something fun without the strings of like, man, isn't this great? But did we kind of shift a little there? Did we kind of like, are we being a little silly here? Are we riding Shazam's coattails here? I just wanted something that was just very full on. Like, what we have here is good. If only we could just like, kind of just maybe like spruced it up just a hair, but not a lot. Because I think what we have works, but it just feels like I can't take this to I can put in front of a general audience. I think this plays like gangbusters. In front of like the discerning comic book fan or the discerning kind of movie goer, it's going to be like, yeah, I'm going to quote Brad Bird here. It's almost like I feel like you guys are. I'm at a smorgasbord. You guys all you offer me is bean dip. To some degree, it feels like that. It feels like what we have is like, hey, it's an all you can eat buffet, but it's like, we're just going to offer you like the same thing to some degree. I don't know. I mean, I think you were right earlier on that some things are quite refreshing that we do have here, but I feel like it gets overwhelmed by like just kind of not as much substance as I think as we were getting hyped up during the movie for. It's like anyway. So yeah, I'm a little. I'm a little tepid on it, but I enjoyed it.
I think, at least if I'm able to be accurate in sort of how you feel, in a nutshell, it's that you like the movie, but you wish you would more than just like it. You would like love, or if you feel like the movie could have been more, but you feel like the movie does not necessarily play safe, but instead of hitting a home run, you felt like it just hit to get to first base.
I guess, yeah, I guess that's a good way of putting it. Just again, overall, I thought it was good, but it could have been great, or at the very least, it was okay, and it could have been really good, you know.
No, that's fair. I mean, like I said, I feel like there's certain things that could the villains, being as they are. I think it's kind of a matter of let's probably just since
Yeah.
we're want to get into the main discussion. So, what specifically do you want to go by plot wise, or just talk more in general?
Yeah, let's hop around a little bit. I think the place to start, just to make sure we don't kind of overlook it, because we kind of hyped it up already.
Mhm.
I mean, Jaime Reyes himself, again, probably the best aspect of the movie. Again, Zolo just doing a great job in realizing that character. I mean, what really struck me in the movie right off the bat, which was when I'm in the movie, I'm almost doing like a little mental checklist in terms of like yes, this is really working for me. Like yeah, like okay, Jaime Reyes, he's graduated college, but then he has like the deflating kind of grounded struggle of he has to support his family because they haven't been taking the best care of themselves to or at the very least life has been really beating them down, and stuff's happened while he was gone, so there's like a real world struggle there for the Reyes family, and you feel for this kid. As again, that's kind of the thing that Zolo brings to the surface so well in the roles that he's played, like between this and Cobra Kai. You root for this kid, you feel for him. So there's an everyman quality to him.
No, what I really appreciate is that it really the beginning of the movie where like Jaime Reyes is coming back home and is just interacting with his family. Man, there's like I feel like the his that those scenes have probably the most realism infused. I feel like I've scenes in a super movie that I've seen in probably long while. Like in the sense that like our superhero character has financial problems.
Yeah.
Parents have are struggling. His dad just had a heart attack a while back, and he's just finding all of this, and he's got loans, he's got debt, and all that stuff, and it's like I think back to like even though I personally defend and appreciate Tom Holland's Spider Man and the John Watts trilogy, I do. It's always the thing. There's always the thing where for them to see Spider Man, the financial troubles aren't as emphasized as much as say Toby and McGuire's, but I think it's interesting to see a young you know look like socioeconomically class teen struggling and then suddenly get superpowers. And obviously, Jaime Reyes' Blue Beetle is very much in the mold of Peter Parker Spider Man, just like any other, lead teen characters. But it was really, it felt to me, I think it really felt to me in those scenes like both the writers and the director had a lot of fun and like, hey, this is for you, an audience, to know, like, hey, this guy is one of us, one of us being like an average person that like, started to make ends meet, got loans. His family is, not wanting to trouble him, but he's wanting to help out, and so it was both, relatable, dramatic, and overall, like I think what would not make the movie work if Jaime didn't have chemistry with his family. The actors didn't, come off as likable and endearing and relatable, and with that being achieved, the rest of the movie then worked off of that, dynamic. Because if we don't care about Jaime and his family, then it's just a regular superhero movie. While it is ultimately still a superhero movie, there is a little bit extra in terms of like the personal family dynamic and the cultural aspect of Jaime being of a Latino American.
Yeah, also, I do like this too. Here's something you don't see every day. I like the universal logic of college, where it's like, well, you see here, like, he's very optimistic he'll be able to find something because he's the first Reyes to graduate college, and it's the logic. I'll be able to find something. Which again, I think initially there was that especially back then, but even now, especially, it's like you think, okay, you get the degree and it's gonna go smoothly because who wouldn't hire you? But it's not the certainty that it once was way back in the day.
I will say, as a lawyer, it was funny, and also like it was funny for his sister to make the joke. It's like, oh, here's a pre-law degree. Are you looking for pre-lawyers? It's just like it's so funny, but also I just feel like Jaime had an unrealistic expectation of him being employable just because he has a pre-law degree. Because
Yeah,
for people who have pre-law degrees, this is for lawyer. Like I majored in history in college and minor in education, and the thing is, majoring in pre-law and not going to law school, that degree isn't really much value. Um, so I feel like it doesn't seem realistic for Jaime to do it, but it is interesting that in this like sort of the world of the film that Jaime is interested in becoming a lawyer. I guess hopefully if our sequel or whatever continuations on, maybe Jaime's like applying to law school or going to law school. And I think Kogeas is I want to highlight Kogeas' comment at 9:18 p.m. about the Gotham sweatshirt.
anyway, let's just read the comments. So Jaime Reyes wears a Gotham sweatshirt, and Batman is mentioned a few times, and they don't make it clear which universe is Batman they're referencing.
That's probably for the best if this
Yeah.
characters are part of the DCU. But it is interesting that it does exist in some sort of DC universe. There's mentions of Superman, Batman, and Jaime apparently went to college in Gotham. It would be cool if whenever we see DCU Batman, like Jaime Reyes geeks out and is like, "Oh, Batman, you saved me from like a mugger, like when I was like trying to get food from my dorm or whatever." But it is interesting because in the comics, I know that Jaime Reyes secretly desires to be like a dentist.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was like
That I didn't know. He wants to be like Hermie the dentist. In this case, Jaime the dentist.
no, yeah, I think it was an issue where it's like review of deepest darkest desire, and like the comedic punchline for him is like, "Oh, I want to be a dentist." And
That is
the joke think the logic is that like Jaime is like very practical, and dentistry is a very reliable, well paying profession. So if he gets that, he takes care of his parents, all that stuff. And
sure.
I am very interested for this version, like what kind of lawyer would he want to be? I figure, considering his background and just sort of like what he goes through in the movie, he might want to do something specific to like immigration or public, doing some public interest work. So that'd be interesting.
Yeah. So, Palmera City. So in the comics, if I understand, it was El Paso. It was El
Yes.
Paso, Texas. And now, if I understand, so Palmera is kind of a combination of a few things. There's a little, I think, mostly in the suburbs. There's some Texas. There's majority of it's Miami, but with the upper. Basically, when we get to I forget what we call the high, kind of the high class section.
Or are you talking about like the I Lost Palmera City felt like a mix of Miami, like '80s era Miami and Puerto Rico.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about the. I'm just saying there's Miami. I'm saying we have like two sections of town. We have that. Do we call it the Keys? Is the Keys what we call like the rundown?
Is like Jaime's
Yeah, that's what I mean. So we have the Keys. I'm forget what the other part of town's called.
Oh, I see. I think it's like kind of like uptown or downtown, like.
I guess just for simplicity, we'll say uptown.
Yeah.
So we have the uptown section, which essentially feels like Miami or upscale Puerto Rico, and then we have maybe a little bit. I guess maybe it's Puerto Rico and or Texas, just for the Keys section. And in general, with the uptown section, there's a little bit of metropolis in there. So like kind of the space age kind of. I like the idea as a symbol in the story that kind of makes sense that you can feel Cord Industries' impact in the world in this city with how upscale things look, because there's kind of a futuristic design to the buildings and how much like the money infused where the money is going in the city.
And what's also interesting is there's kind of like a thematic point because like considering Victoria Court is the one running Cord Industries and her vision in the future and just like the aesthetics of it, it makes when you see like the Beetle cave and like the Beetle and like sort of how Cord's tech look, it's like the difference between like streamlined modern like Apple aesthetic technology and like old school like radio ham,
basically the better technology.
Yeah.
It's better as far as I'm concerned. It's cool and gadget heavy, so I like it. Anyway, yeah. So speaking of which, so okay, so Ted Cord taken out of the equation here, which again, again, it's on one hand, it's how the origin goes. Again, he's not really around usually. I believe I forget if like in the comics too, we did this thing where he was seemingly dead, then eventually he came back, or if he was full on dead. Like some iterations of the story, he's just full on dead.
When Jaime Reyes came out of the scene in the comics, like this was a year or two after Infinite Crisis, where like the prelude leading up to it, like Ted Kord gets killed by Maxwell Lord, and then I think like he comes back as a Black Lantern and comes back to full life and brightest day. And then New 52 happens. I think just eventually, just like if Jaime is there and Ted's not there, like it's presumably like Ted's like with Booster Gold, or it could be certain iterations where it's like Ted and Jaime are in the same place at the same time, and Ted's just like doing less superheroing and being like a mentor to Jaime. So
something to mention with the Ted Cord stuff is I really like the opening credits of this movie because it's very evocative of what we did with the Incredible Hulk. Like the way we can open the movie and we have this sort of like little kind of summation on like the mythos of the Blue Beetle with the Dan Garrett discovery of the Scarab, and then just kind of like
yeah, I really like how comic booky it felt at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like this isn't like, oh, the real world that becomes heightened when like the character gets superpowers. Like, oh, this is like a very comic booky world with like Dan Garrett and Ted Kord, like all the news headlines. It's like, oh, this is kind of like how, if you're going through like a certain comic and where the character's a legacy, there'll be like news, be going through like printed prints of like the past like iterations of that character.
But no one ever gives the Incredible Hulk movie credit in terms of what it did there. They've never really repeated as often as I think they should have. So this is really refreshing to see this device kind of incorporated, because right nowadays we don't really have opening credit sequences with very few exceptions.
I think part of it is that like depending upon the character, sometimes the director or creators involved will want to just like start, this is a real, like pretty real, there's like a realistic grounded world becomes heightened over time, or that like the character doesn't really have much mythos to like do kind of like opening credits where you have like names on like computer screens or whatever, or they want those elements to be shown like Easter eggs throughout the film, but at the opening you kind of want to do something else. So this is kind of the thing where it's like, there it is sort of the formula, but it is kind of cool to see like the movie kind of embrace the comic book. Like, oh, here's the lore, and here's like there's a history to this world. It's not just a random city that just is a fictional city. It's a fictional city that had a superhero, stuff.
So bringing that up does bridge my issue with the lack of Ted Kord in this movie. I'm not saying Ted Kord in the present sense, but just Ted Kord kind of like visualize the period. Because again, we build him up. Obviously, we see the tech, and we kind of do that awesome kind of like credits thing. But I mean, your logic does stand up to snuff there, Rohit. But it just does beg the question, like, wouldn't it be interesting if we had Blue Beetle as not just like established lore more presently, and that like for like nothing major, like just what if what if the George Lopez character were actually actively mentioning Blue Beetle, or at the very least like perhaps. And what if he recognized that Scarab's design, something familiar about it, or more so, what if what if he would mention at some point that he invents because he was inspired by Blue Beetle, has like a little mini shrine or like a poster or something, like what I mean? Like we just kind of established that a little earlier versus like, oh man, how coincidental, the Blue Beetles led us to the actual Blue Beetle.
Isn't my so basically what you're trying to get at is that you wish the movie had sort of the framework where one of, maybe if not Rudy, maybe Jaime himself, like that there is an active interest in the Blue Beetle history, whereas in this movie the way it is that Jaime just sort of accidentally stumbles into the Blue Beetle legacy and history, and Jenny's the one that kind of helps to contextualize that. You would want him to be more like Miss Marvel in the sense of being an active fan, or someone that act like the history and legacy is at the forefront of the movie.
Yeah, either him or, again, I understand if it's a generational thing, because that's what you have with the Blue Beetle character, because there's three different versions of that character for essentially three generations: Golden Age, Bronze Age, and the Modern Age. Depending on how you want to label that. But yeah, it just feels like I think it would make more sense for like Rudy. But yeah, I guess what I was hoping for is if it was established through Rudy, and then what we would have is Jaime once he gets this suit, he's looking to the Blue Beetle in some sense, not like in a deep. I'm not saying he should know instantly, like, oh, I know where Ted Core's hideout is and everything. But what if he just had kind of like a kind of like some like a vague like here's what I can do with this power. I can be like that guy who also was a Blue Beetle, and I essentially am a Blue Beetle using alien technology I don't understand yet.
I feel like it wouldn't be true to sort of like Jaime Reyes' version, like specifically his initial comics run. Um, like
You mean in the initial comics run there was no like he had no idea who Blue Beetle was, like
I
period?
mean, I mean, because the thing is, Blue Beetle wasn't like he was noteworthy for being in Justice International like to readers, but
Yeah,
in the DC universe, he's not like a big like A-lister. Like Blue Beetle was just kind of like he's one of the B League Justice Leaguers that just kind of like gets the shenanigans with Booster Gold.
hmm
And then he got killed, about 2 or 3 years before Jaime came in the picture. And for Jaime, when he becomes Blue Beetle, the Blue Beetle is from like this alien technology reach this whole different mythos and different lore.
yeah, yeah.
And like eventually later on in that run, like he gets noticed of Ted Cord, but that run and that like that character conceives that like this is kind of how like there's Jay Garrick, Flash, and then
Mhm.
Barry Allen Flash, initially like they were not really connected because they were originally in different universes. And Barry Allen was just he read comics that Jay Garrick Flash and just became the Flash, right? But it's not like but the idea for like Blue Beetle doesn't have as direct of a legacy relationship as say the Flash later on with like Barry and Wally or like even with the Green Lanterns. Like for Jaime Reyes specifically, he's kind of more standalone, focus on his adventures, and the Reach comes in later in the run, saw it like fighting crime in El Paso, and it's not as like there's not as much direct connections with the DCU. It's kind of relatively isolated until much later on. So I think for this movie, and I think for when introducing Jaime Reyes, the purpose is you want to introduce Jaime Reyes as his own individual. And yes, there's a history in the lore, and you emphasize that in the opening credits, and then like throughout the course of the movie, there's background, and you see the Beetle Cave. But the I think for this movie, Jaime Reyes is not a person that's like in the comics. He didn't become Blue Beetle because he was a fan of Blue Beetle. He just got this alien bug, and I was like, well, I have these powers, so I'll try to do right by people, and then became a hero. And so in the movie, is they're trying to like focus on Jaime Reyes, is Blue Beetle first, and then there's been other Blue Beetles, and I think probably for Ted Cord, he's probably would have been more important in the sequel because at that point you kind of want to have it's kind of like the what the sequel trilogy tried to do with like Luke, where it's like oh it's a mystery, and the sequel will elaborate and flesh them out. And for the purpose of the movie, you want to focus on Jaime Reyes being this kid down on his luck kid that just magically get these powers and have this kind of this turmoil is like, oh, like I just want to help him with my family. And these powers aren't really doing so. And over the course of time, he gains mastery over the bug, over the scarab, and eventually he becomes like an activist community. Like really, that Jaime Reyes is very particular to his like hometown, which in comics is El Paso, and this is Palmera City, and like helping the people, like his community, his friends, and the whole Blue Beetle stuff, the legacy aspect of it isn't as central to that character, on the initial story. Um,
Right. So, something to mention too, by extension, with Ted Cord. So the Cord family, Victoria. I feel both. Honestly, I think both members of the Cord family are a little thinly written. Victoria, particularly. Again, if I understand it, she's created for the film. I
So
think.
yeah, she's an original character for the film. She specifically shows up in a comic called Blue Beetle Graduation Day. It's kind of it's sort of the synergy thing where I think DC Comics tried to have like Blue Beetle like for Jaime Reyes. I think he was like a high school teenager for a long while, and then Graduation Day is when he I think like gets to college or graduates college. Like it's around like kind of sort of the age Jaime Reyes in the movie is. So and she shows up there, but yeah, she's an original character. Like Blue Ted Core has only like in the comics just like a dad, and
Mhm.
so him having a sister and then by extension, a daughter. It's just adventures in the movie.
Yeah. Again, it feels. This is what I'm saying, Rohit. It feels like they wanted like Ted Cord represented in the movie for some sort of like It feels like they wanted to acknowledge the legacy of the Blue Beetle thing, but again, they didn't really have a good way of doing it. So, okay, so Ted Cord had a daughter, and we're basically doing like a corporate struggle sort of thing, which doesn't really gel, I think, with the main story that we're telling that
Yeah.
well.
The thing is, what's funny is that when you like people say like, "Oh, Blue Beetle's like Iron Man," really, Blue Beetle, in terms of the plot of the movie and just the way like the lore of its structure, it's got a lot of parallels with Ant Man.
Yeah, that's the thing. 'Cause, I mean, had Ted Cord actually been in the movie, which I know would have been a change, but had he been in the movie, it would have been full on Ant Man.
Yeah, I guess that's probably why. I guess they didn't want to like have that still comparisons.
Well, that's the thing, because you have the comparison, but also the fact that ordinarily Ted Cord is not really in that story with him because it's a passing, since it's the next generation's version of that character. But still, it's like we love the Ted Cord Blue Beetle, and you can't really do Blue Beetle movie without acknowledging Ted Cord. So we kind of have to,
I
so we
mean,
kind of have to work him in somehow.
it's all. I feel like Ted Cord is like his like history impacts Jaime Reyes to a certain extent, but I feel like Ted Cord is not as like a pivotal part of Jaime Reyes' life as say like Barry was to Wally. Even like for Scott Lang in the comics, like his whole thing was that he stole like Hank Pym's suit. So there's like a connection to why those two characters will like eventually, interact with each other in the MCU and
Yeah.
dynamic, all that stuff. But for Jaime Reyes, like I don't think you don't think he meets Ted until like years have passed, where he's already been like had adventures on his own in the Teen Titans. So like they're part of the history, but they're not part of each other's lives. If that makes sense.
Right. So that's the thing. So Susan Sarandon, what she does here is, she's very much the messagey villain with, I believe it's imperialism and everything. Just though that's what I read somewhere, but yeah, it's the. I respect that we have a terrible villain that you want to have a come up, like a terrible person as a villain that you want to have a comeuppance for very badly. I understand that and I can respect that.
Sure.
But what we have, she's white collar, she's entitled,
Mm-hmm.
but it just kind of feels like there's some good stuff there, but I don't think we I don't think we quite honed in on. Sorry, I think it's a little heavy-handed in places to deliver the point. Where it feels like, okay, realistically though, would she be that flagrantly like essentially racist or like just well
Well,
would she be essentially that like that elitist? I mean, in full view of the public and stuff.
So actually, so the video that I was watching was making analysis of Blue Beetle and sort of like it's what makes it unique about being just a simple traditional superhero movie. I think the point that it made was like, oh, this movie is not subtle. It's direct. It's blunt. It's people say what's on their minds, and I think that's sort of like part of what that's part of the movie's DNA. Like it's a simple like thing to sort of like the old school traditional superhero movies in the early to mid 2000s and sort of how characters operate there.
Mm-hmm.
I think like not to say what you're saying like isn't there's a merit to your point. Yeah, it isn't subtle. But
I mean, look, I have one example to give you, and this was not with the Victoria Cord character specifically. But this is kind of like what I mean. And so there's some subtlety like that we may have kind of like missed the point of here. Like the receptionist when Jaime Reyes walks in. Yeah, bear in mind, he's not wearing a name tag or anything. He just walks into this receptionist. My name is Jaime Reyes. Very clear. He says his name. His name is Jaime Reyes.
yes,
And she keeps calling him Jamie. That gag makes no sense. Why would she call him Jamie? It's not
because,
spelled out or anything.
because I think it's a oh I see.
You see what I mean? It's like he's not wearing a name tag.
I think it. I mean, it could still be like still a microaggression if it's like this kind. It's probably to display the point that this reception is the kind of person that even if they're heard the correct pronunciation, they don't either maybe not by malicious, but just by sheer laziness, will just mispronounce
I mean,
it.
there's laziness, but then there's just the incompetence of like, okay, even if you're just like just taking it at face value, Jaime. So if you were spelling it, you might spell with an H. Okay, that's one thing. Okay, if you weren't going to put the due
Well,
diligence in on
well, no,
that, but
you
it's
can
like,
spell it. It can't because it's Jaime, whereas Jamie's
yeah,
Jamie. You
no,
know.
I know that. I'm just saying like the way it's like he's saying it though. He's just like when you hear Jaime, you're thinking like you're kind of thinking
Well,
H.
I mean, also it could be just that like this receptionist just isn't doesn't care and is that apathetic that she just doesn't she doesn't care.
It just feels like she's going out of her way to insult him though. That's what it feels like.
I mean, I think for that part, I think it's more just like that's just a kind of a microaggression where people will not per, they'll mispronounce her name now because of initials because they don't care, but it's still annoying and kind of rude, right? So
Yeah.
I think the receptionist was like her doing that wasn't to put her in a good light. It was just kind of like, oh, this is kind of was a struggle, one of the struggles that Jaime Reyes, being a Latino guy, has to deals with that other people deal with.
I still think we clunkily delivered that one, though. I think that one's a bit of like a thinker of like, wait a minute, how is she?
I've
Is she
I've
getting that
I've
wrong?
I have people, even like people that I work with, like we like mispronounce my name like often, and it's like even when I correct them, sometimes it's just kind of like it's if you're trying to look at it a good way, it's like okay, they're just hard for them to pronounce a name like that, or in a bad way, they just don't care. So I think really this was just like like Jaime being the background he has, he gets this kind of annoyance that like someone that would be white wouldn't have.
Yeah, but I think that you'd imagine that it would just be she gives up on Reyes or mispronounces Reyes like 50 different ways, like that. You'd imagine. I don't know. I don't know. I still look. I hear your point. I understand what they're trying to do there. I still think that the way in which we delivered that moment still feels a little clunky. But on the whole, though, getting away from how the execution of that moment went down, I just think in general, though, moments like that perhaps feel when we're doing, I think, better stuff elsewhere. That, like, for example, like there's a real fear of INS when and they're afraid of like going to the police and getting help and like consulting people what to do about this scarab
Sure.
because the government's going to get involved in everything like that. That's I think that's a realistic, and also the whole what is it, gentrification? Is that what you call it? The whole they were pushing people out of the neighborhood sort of thing.
Correct.
So the whole gentrification thing,
Mhm.
like that's good. That's a relevant thing. And we have like parallels about the whole like that home invasion scene. Like and all of that, I think is playing tremendously well.
Yeah.
And occasionally it's like she's we have like some of Victoria's interactions with Jaime and the whole like man she's just being like outright malicious. Yeah, we'll just get another one. Just like kill him. I don't care. So, we'll replace him with another one, or we'll do it. We'll like
I mean,
receptionist. And,
I guess like there. I mean, if you kind of not to paint all people that are there from Victoria's background in broad brush, but man, if you just kind of for some people that have that kind of background and wealth, they can you'd be very surprised just how cavalier they just regarded like the help or things like that. Well, I mean, and I guess like it's I guess like I guess the thing would be that if Ted Core was in the picture, there may be a thing that the movie could have done like, oh, this is how like a good person who has money and wealth can interact with like people lesser than on the socioeconomic ladder. But I don't think this movie would, was interested in doing that. It's like, okay, look, we got this guy who's struggling. Here's the lady who's got all the money and power. Underdog story, go. Um, and so I think like that was just kind of like okay, like I think Susan Sarandon being so comically evil as she is, I think that's kind of part of the charm of the movie. It's just like God, she's so she like it's. I think like if
you
she
kind of wanted to see her get punched, didn't you?
I think that's to the effect of like that's I mean the role wasn't like super like in depth, but Susan Sarandon knew what she was doing and executed it well, and that I think makes the movie work.
Yeah.
I especially love the part. I mean, we'll jump a little bit ahead. So when you get into Court Industries, and you see Victoria Court around like a bunch of like non-white kids. It's just like it's like oh man,
It is really funny. I'll give you that. That was
yeah,
really.
yeah. It's
I'm with you there. I'm with you there. Yeah.
yeah. So I think it feels like to me that like when issues about race and class is brought up in a more dramatic sense, like it works for you. But I guess when it goes for humor, sometimes it can leave a little desire, which I can get.
I mean, again, I do appreciate like that visual image you just mentioned there, in which I think we're conveying like, okay, so she's very much projecting something completely different than
yeah,
what she
but,
really is, and also how it relates to our bad guy, like how it relates there. But that's what I'm saying. You're right. Dramatically, I think I'm liking it more
yeah,
in that sense. Yeah.
yeah.
So on the flip side, we have Jenny. Now Jenny is interesting in that I like how so I think it's interesting that we have like the class struggle thing kind of going on here in terms of like the relationship with Jaime and Jenny is that they have this connection, they have the cord connection there.
Mhm.
And I like the family initially doesn't like her because her name is what's made their life a living heck. And like there's some skepticism there, and there's kind of an arc of them kind of growing to like her, and the fact that this Jenny character has to answer like, yeah, what's your company doing? All this stuff, like, well, just kind of answering to, oh man, I've really made my father's name has kind of made these people's lives terrible. So this is horrible, and I gave the guy the burger box, you know.
I kind of wish like I think Jenny was fine, but I think it would have been interesting if Jenny was kind of like maybe a little bit more not ditzy, but like very much like, oh, she's like very much lived a very rich and sheltered life.
That's the
Even
thing. I don't think we hit those. I think
yeah,
that's what
and I feel
the
like that
thin
would have
writing is. Feels like there's a potential. That feels like that's what that scene's going for, but we
because
didn't
the
really
thing
go
is
full tilt.
the thing is Jenny Court is like, oh, she's like strong, capable. Like, she's like not Victoria. She's like the humanitarian and all that stuff.
Yeah,
But I think it would have been interesting if you had that, but when interacting with like people that are from a different socioeconomic class, Jenny could come off as like being rude and like arrogant, but not intentionally. Just that's kind of how she's raised.
yeah.
And I think that would have made some fun tensions with like her and Jaime, because Jaime is like he's a regular guy, and he probably would get where Jenny's coming from, but maybe his family doesn't, and that would have been a little bit of a fun tension where like eventually Jenny kind of grows up to be a more grounded, like regular person, and still have the humanitarian. I mean, she still has the humanitarian from the beginning, but have a little bit more of like she's like she like more grounded, like she's kind of more just like in touch with the regular people.
Because I feel the way it plays currently is that I guess when you look at it kind of like I guess like a macro sort of thing, it looks like okay, a girl with essentially aside from daddy issues and first world problems, there's not a lot going on there.
She's the hope of Van Dyne. She's like, yeah, it's like
Yeah, no, you're right. That's what I'm saying. There's essentially it's there's kind of like there's a Hope Van Dyne sort of thing going on there, but
yeah, and Jaime is like a little bit more of a less of a screw up Scott Lang. He's still a regular guy.
Let's be honest. Jaime is the love child of Scott Lang and Luis. Let's just say it now.
Yeah, no, I like kind of how Jaime like he very much when he gets the powers, he's very freaked out about it. It's not like the thing where it's like, oh my god, and then he's like, oh, this is really cool, and then just goes for it. Like it takes a while for him to like warm up to being like a superhero.
Yeah, so that brings us to something we should talk about with the family overall. So
Sure.
the big transformation scene, as I was saying, we saw in the trailer and everything. We saw the big scene in the movie. Now, trailer
Mhm.
does that scene quite horrifically in an interesting way,
Yeah.
just playing like the freak out and like the family concern for him and everything. But in context, having seen the movie and everything, the way they play that scene, this is where we get into the tone issue of the family. I think there are two scenes for me that really kind of illustrate this. The big scene, I think the easiest scene to kind of like illustrate is the transformation scene in that it feels like we're riding Shazam's coattails the way we played in the movie. We're shifting from drama and harsh realities to like okay, we're playing some music during the scene, and there's this kind of like a comedic freak out about what's going on. Where maybe be like, oh god, poor Jaime, oh dear god, like genuine dread, and playing the comedy from that. Like it feels like like think about this. Like I know James Gunn obviously it's a question of like well, I think it's more like in the release of the movie he had anything to do with this one, but let's just say. It feels like if James Gunn had hands in this, not that he has to, but let's say he did, we would have played like the moment just very, very straightforward, and the comedy would have come from just how I don't know, just how frantic and just how like horrifying it is on the family. What is happening, sort of thing. But again, without I don't know, necessarily dressing up the scene with we got music flickering on and off, and we have like oh, what is it? It's up his butt.
No, I think yeah. Back to how the trailer played it was very like horrific and the kind of a. I think the probably either a test audience or just when looking at it, if you had sort of how the scene portrays in the trailer in the movie, the issue would be that it kind of would just be a little. It would be if anything. I know you're talking about total whiplash. If anything, I think it would kind of hurt the tone of the movie because if it's so horrific for him to become the Blue Beetle it kind of makes things a little weird when Jaime Reyes is having fun doing Blue Beetle stuff because it's like,
wouldn't
oh,
that be an arc though? Wouldn't that be like initially just this terrifying thing, and then he learns to have fun with it?
I think for me it's like I think for an audience member for audiences like, they see like it's horrific. I think for them it's kind of more linear. It's like all right, this thing is horrific. Then this like for this character to become like Blue Beetle, you kind of wanted this like, oh, like this is scary being Blue Beetle throughout the whole thing. It's kind of I think like the way it be kind of, I think the way that scene plays is like, oh, it's kind of like Venom comparisons. It's like
I think that was the biggest thing they were fighting in this movie because Blue Beetle very easily can fall into the Venom category, especially considering like Young Justice, for example. Young Justice has the arc with the AI in the suit in which it's very pro murder, and then we reveal like okay the intentions of the Reach and everything. So it was like that for a reason. Where Venom, of course, is having a lot of fun with like the very murder happy symbiote.
Yeah, I think that like I also think that maybe I don't know how long term plans they had. I would very much think that they had the scene play out as they did in the movie, because the way the scene plays in the trailer, it would be more fitting to see that for say one random alien that gets like the scarab in a far off planet, and then you have the contrast when you do like the Reach, because then it's like oh like not everyone has Jaime Reyes. It's just like oh it's funny or weird. It's like oh this is traumatic, and that would up the stakes for when the Reach comes to Earth. I think that's probably if that was thinking long term, it's like, oh, you want Jaime to be like an exception to like, oh, this Blue Beetle is just incorporated just being like a fun superhero thing. Whereas in other worlds, on other planets, the scarab is like a weapon of war attaching to your body and using you as a weapon.
Mm. Sure. I mean, I guess too. The other thing with that is even less the transformation. I think this is always like a weird moment in the movie, but it's kind of summarized kind of like the Shazam coattails of it all. Here is like okay, we have our big flight through town, then we do like dumb gags here and there with the family, like they can see his chorizo. It's like I didn't need it. I don't think we needed that in the movie, but they put it in there. It's like I don't know. It feels like we're undercutting like a little bit of the severity of the situation, even if there is comedy to be played. It feels like okay, their loved one, they're calling the police, they're very frantic. Oh God, we're so worried about him. Then he shows up, and we make a cheap joke, and then he passes out, and then we kind of come to, and then we're like, this is what I'm talking about. The tone whiplash that I'm getting here. It's like okay, fantastic superhero stuff, and then he's flying around, he's doing stuff, and then we're hitting on like the pathos of the family, and then it's like comedy, and then back to the drama, and then it's like okay, we have a problem here with the thing that's on his back. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making any sense there.
I mean, I don't like I don't feel like it's really much of a tonal whiplash for this movie because I feel like if this movie has total whiplash, like I feel like the old school the Raimi Spider-Man movies have like significant tonal whiplash, and those movies are so memorable because of the tonal whiplash. So I think for this, it's like maybe I don't know if it's the humor. I feel like for me, I've noticed that in terms of just like the humor for superhero films, I think I have a little bit of a higher tolerance in terms of like the degree of humor and the kinds of humor utilized by most recent superhero movies. And for you, that's lesser or maybe the humor.
I mean, look, I'm not against humor. I don't know. It just felt like I guess the biggest thing I'm bumping up against in this movie is that with the humor, it just feels like I don't know. I don't know if it's just bad timing in terms of like when we get these superhero things or not. But again, a lot of it does feel like we're trying to capture the lightning, pun intended, the lightning in a bottle of of the Shazam of the Shazam family, if you will. It just feels a little bit like, okay, so we have to have like a family the response of some sort to everything that he does, which is where we're gonna have like laughs manufactured in there versus like sometimes I think they're more genuine in the front of the movie versus like, okay, we have the action going on, then family, then we're gonna throw the family in there. So I guess maybe okay, maybe tonal whiplash is maybe a bad way of putting. I don't know. Something just feels like a little off in like the structure or the construction of things here. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if
It
that
seems
makes
like
any
your
sense.
barometer for wackiness is maybe not it feels like for you it's like the certain level of wackiness you can handle for a super movie, and then past a certain point it's like it's not working for you. Because whereas for me, I
I
think
guess maybe it's how recurring it is. Maybe that's it.
yeah, I guess it's like I mean, I only watched it just once, but I feel like in rewatching it, I don't feel like it'll be too prominent to where it's like a out and out comedy. I think Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and maybe The Flash are more have a lot more comedic beats going on than Blue Beetle. So I think Blue Beetle is a little bit more balanced than the prior two. But I appreciate. I mean, I like The Flash the most, and Blue Beetle I really like. And Shazam, the more time goes by, I may not like it when I revisit the
Well,
movie.
you know what it might be. It might be when the comedy, like every time you hear someone complain about the humor in the MCU films, it's kind of the thing of like the fear that the humor is undercutting the drama of the moment. And I don't know, for I guess to some degree I think maybe a better example within the transformation scene is like what precedes the transformation scene. The fact like, okay, we have the scare in the burger box, and they're essentially playing keep away and like, hey guys, this is important. Like, no, we're gonna toss it around, and there's potentially dangerous this dangerous thing. We're gonna open the box and we're gonna play around with it, and then the bad stuff happens to them. I don't know. It feels like the family's just being ridiculously irresponsible, especially when it's like essentially the kid's going to be their meal ticket. Like, no, let's mess around with it a little.
I feel like that's reflective of the damage of the family, where Jaime is kind of like he's very much like I think he's probably older than his sister, but he very much feels like the little kid, or at least treated like the little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with the fact that they're like the whole comedy when the opening where it's like, oh hey, how's everyone doing? And it's like, oh, and here's all this bad news that we just kept from you while you were in school and working hard. It's just like so I feel like for Jaime, I think it's more the damage the family's like Jaime is just kind of, it's like, hey, you focus on your thing, and then when they have like this it looks like it's just a random like toy, right? You wouldn't know that the blue beat like if, in the universe you just see like, oh, this looks like a very colorful blue beetle toy or blue bug toy, and it's in a burger, so it's like, okay, like if you're not paying attention to Big Belly Burger, it's like, oh, it's probably like one of those Happy Meal toys, and you won't think much of it. And then I think them tossing around, it's like, oh, we're just tossing around a toy. And eventually, when it does land in Jaime and it becomes lights up, it's like, oh, this is new. So I think it's kind of the thing where like the family is just likes to take the piss out of Jaime, both endearingly and just that like I feel like a lot of the comedy is just like, oh, his family just likes to neck him or likes to bust his balls or whatever. And this is especially prevalent when Jaime is like having his thing with Jennifer.
Right.
I do love the running gag of him being like she's like the rich white suitor from the telenovela, and
No,
just
yeah, that is look. That's funny. I do, however, think like, okay, if them getting into like a whole thing that gives them the excuse to leave the room, I think maybe that goes on a little long. Versus, oh yeah, it's just like that thing from earlier, And then okay, I don't know, but yeah, you're right. It's a funny runner. I'll give you that.
Mhm.
So the beetle, so the scarab itself, brutally adhered to his back. So in a believable way, where you believe, okay, he's unable to remove this thing. He can't just like plop it off like Iron Man. Like it's like later on in the later MCU films, it's like, okay, that thing is like embedded in him. A really good bit of makeup, it seems. 'Cause I don't know. That effect looked practical to me. Like the whole like thing adhered to his back. I don't know. It looked good. Anyway, so the suit itself, as you said earlier, it looked right off the page. I agree with you full heartedly. I was very excited in the marketing of this, just seeing like how good that suit looked. Has like the energy construct abilities. It's again. I wish look. A part of me wishes we intimated the reach a little bit more in the suit, particularly with the AI and everything. But I don't know. I don't know how much that was just them afraid that they would not get another movie versus them like, okay, we can assume we're gonna have another one, so we'll save all the reach stuff for then.
Yeah, I think this movie, it being an origin story, you want to keep things simple and not too cluttered. So I because I feel like if there was any sequel teasers to Ted and to the Reach and or the Reach, and the movie doesn't get a sequel, it's like, well, it just feels kind of like racing promises aren't able to be delivered. So I think the way the movie is structured in terms of like not really delving too much into like the big stories is them just like, hey, this movie is just the only movie. We want to make more, but let's just make it stand alone and have it be a complete story from beginning to end.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think I wish the AI could have had like a little bit more personality, which I think would. That's what I guess that's what I'm looking for in like intimating the reach sort of thing. I mean, I don't disagree with what you said, but I mean, just the fact that we kind of have that a little bit more. Like the suit is offering lethal measures, which feels like inconsistent with the reach. But I don't know. It feels like there's no personality. There's no like kind of menace that then kind of gets curbed as it goes forward. But again, I
Well,
think that was a fear of the Venom comparison. It's probably why they didn't do it.
well, I mean, also part of the thing, it's like it could have been interesting if like the AI was kind of like how the AI was in Young Justice, where it's like it's very hostile, it's very
Yeah,
aggressive, and maybe over the course of the movie, like him talking to Kaji, um, and her, eventually bonding with Jaime, because it could be the thing where like the AI is very much like Victoria's line of thinking of like ruthless efficiency, pragmatism, and over time and bonding with Jaime and his family, the AI could then be like more altruistic, passionate.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's essentially what I was kind of hoping for. Which I mean, I think it might be there. It was just very subtle, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the way with how it ends, it's like, oh, like the fact that the AI speaks Spanish, you kind of don't have that arc.
Yeah,
But I think it might have been interesting. I think probably why they had it that way because maybe I guess like I know we're talking about sequel stuff and we should talk and the movie should stand on its own. But I really think that had this movie gone a sequel or two and they done the Reach storyline, it could be the thing where maybe the way that the Scarab, because I think the Scarab in the comics and in the Young Justice, it was damaged when it came to Earth. So it doesn't have a complete control over its host like the traditional Scarab would on other planets that the Reach have invaded. And so probably in that aspect, if you were to see like Black Beetle or any character that has a Scarab on them, they would act and the AI would be much more how you expect a traditional, Blue Beetle AI to interact, and like Kaji being damaged as it is, like there's a foil or contrast to that.
yeah. So speaking of which, Code Geass anime fan, most recent comment says Victoria Cord was a pretty one-note villain. The other bad guy was more interesting, in my opinion. So let's talk about Omak or Ignacio, or however you want to go
Yeah,
about
that's
that.
nice. Yeah.
Yes. So the fact that we're doing OMAC here, I think it's a great idea for villain plot wise, in that we have a man-made version of the Scarab essentially, which would be essentially be OMAC, which I thought that was a really good idea. Plus, OMAC's very topical right now. It's one of the recurring bad guys on My Adventures with Superman, technically.
Also furthers the Ant-Man parallels with it's like, oh, Darren Cross
Yeah,
using the Ant-Man formula to weaponize and militarize it, and
yeah.
wanting to use the Scarab code to like militarize, weaponize her. Yeah.
See, it doesn't help that they're both insect themed with all these comparisons, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, yeah. So I think here's the thing. Also, look wise, I mean, just bear in mind, OMAC's had a few looks over the years. Plus, you have like the OMAC, robots versus the OMAC, like the character who was like a sentient. Like again, OMAC stands for One Man Army Corps.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, if you look at My Adventures with Superman right now, My Adventures with Superman has a design for OMAC that looks pretty much like this, only not a suit of armor. It's pretty much it's kind of a giant robot thing that looks very similar to how like this guy's suit looks at the end of the day. So I thought it was really annoying. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Now, here's the thing. I think there's a missed opportunity with Ignacio though, in that I love I love the parallel to Jaime that I think on paper they're going for here, and that you know Jaime potentially is basically he's every time this guy is not in the suit, I think he's interesting. Is the fact that this guy is being kind of like he's manipulated by Victoria Cord. He's very much he's kind of sidled with this suit that she's put him in. That is kind of essentially part of her legacy.
Yeah.
With the in pursuit of the scarab and everything, and she's done terrible things to to the Latino community in doing so. And I think I think that's great, and I like how that kind of parallels, Jaime's going up against with Cord in a sense, and that what kind of like the risk is should they get the scarab and everything, is then doing these terrible things, and he's on kind of the lighter side of that, just kind of using that to combat the bad stuff that she's putting out there with this guy caught in the middle, and perhaps again Jaime went to Cord for a job, for a couple times here, one was scraping the gum, and the other, the other being he was going there for any job after he lost the initial one. So it's kind of the question of like, had Jaime just been, not kind of bumped up against the system, who knows what would have happened to him
Mm-hmm.
to some degree. Now, again, that's interesting. That's kind of what we're kind of teeing up in the beginnings of the film there, and the idea that Ignacio is probably going to turn on Victoria once he sees the light. And I like that concept. However, when he's in the suit and he's fighting Blue Beetle, he becomes so one-dimensional and less interesting because he's throwing out these like, let me tell you about strength. He's just a brute. He's a mindless brute versus like, hey, maybe this guy is doing a job and he feels bad about it, or at the very least this guy's doing bad things but maybe you care about him,
Oh, I that's an interesting way, because then I think would have
because
been like,
that's what it seems like they're hyping up in the start before he suits up. It's like, okay, this guy he doesn't
he has
necessarily like this, but he's
agency.
doing it because he has to. He's able to go lock it and everything. We know what was in the locket.
Oh, that's really, yeah. It would have been interesting, like with that sort of take, for him to interact with like the family members, because I definitely feel like the sister and like the grandma would have a lot of thoughts on how he about his actions, and being
Yeah.
like and he's like betraying his people and being an
Mhm.
agent for like a white imperialistic capitalist.
It's just a lot of money on the table that we're not doing anything with there compared to, and our payoff is there. The payoff's nice, but getting there, it's just like all that missed opportunities. Like, you don't know you think you're strong. It's like, come on. It's like,
You know what I just realized? Carapax is basically Taskmaster with like the Captain Marvel and like memory reveal at the end.
yeah.
And then yeah, I think, and I feel like, and I think, yeah, I think, yeah, it robs it kind of, yeah, I think with the whole mindless brute thing, it's like they just wanted like a,
Because Jaime's trying to talk to him all throughout that fight, and there's no back and forth. It's just like, let me punch you, but
yeah, I
hold
think it's not
still.
just a random like, goon, like, so basically, that one guy in like Shang-Chi, the one that has like the
Razor fist.
razor, yeah, just basically like a grunt that's just fighting Jaime and just is doing about his business. Um, yeah, I think with the way he's structured, he does it, there could have been more interesting stuff if he had agency and then made the turn in the end and have a little bit more of like a humanity to him, rather than just kind of be like he's basically like a weapon because of
Yeah.
amnesia. Yeah.
Which I get is the point of OMAC, and OMAC's essentially kind of like a living weapon. However, you do find, depending on which version of OMAC you're doing, like this one, you have humanity within the weapon, though.
Mhm.
But yes, that's the thing. I love the with the memory reveal, though. I do like what we see about this guy's backstory. And I thought that was very honestly, that was possibly some of the most gripping stuff in the movie to some extent. But and again, like I'm gonna take her out. You kind of wish he took her out more brutally, but still, it's like I'm gonna you and your family go, and
It
I'll
would
take
have been very interesting, with his experiences, but if he wasn't mind wipe and all that, if him choosing to work on Victoria Court and being supported with the OMAC, maybe his line of reasoning is like, well, if the OMAC exists, no one would have to face the loss of my loved ones.
Yeah,
I did, and
but
that
he doesn't vocalize any of that though.
yeah, and I guess that would make the movie. I guess that would have probably pushed the movie to more ideological like discussion about like when can being a weapon be good for for I know there's the phrase that's out of memes like sacrifices for the greater good, and it's like the thing is as a superhero you do have to make sacrifices of your own self or others around you for the greater good sometimes, and that would have been interesting to see. Jaime maybe as him being the young naive guy, it's like no, you stick to your principles, and maybe it's him having to change and being a more mature superhero in that respect, or maybe him winning over like Carapax, and maybe Carapax turns not because he gains his memory, but because he's won over by Jaime's argument.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. He could have felt really bad about what happened with his family. I would have been would have started a major turning point for him. And in the third act, they probably would have come to realization.
Yeah, and maybe with how the family is taken, basically had their home invaded by like Cord's forces. Maybe that would have been the start of the turn.
Maybe give him a little PTSD in which the memories would come back to him. But at the very, not saying that's what would have facilitated the change full on, but it would have like caused parallels for him. Like seeing I'm on the wrong side here.
If he didn't have the amnesia, he would have just been a guy that's like willing to do bad things because he sees a greater good. And then the family getting hurt in the process, and the dad dying. Yeah. That probably would have been like, oh, this is going too far, and I need to stop being a part of this. Although I guess at that point, then there's the scientist character who like Victoria. I wonder if
we gave that guy all of Homac's development. That's just a shame.
Oh man, I do appreciate like how he goes out.
He's the fat guy who eats the burger that gives us the scare. That's all he opens the door. That's all he does.
Hey man, at least he goes out saying his full name.
He does, yeah, sure.
I guess, yeah.
By the way, Jaime has a problem we got to address in this movie. I wonder if this drove you as crazy as it drove me. Jaime, stop looking so gobsmacked at these big sacrificial moments and just run, okay? It's like he's watching that guy like say his name, go, get out of here, and he gets pulverized. And then we have like you and your family get out of here, and he's looking. What do you think's gonna happen, Jaime? Come on, man. Like,
yeah, I think you're that last part's like, hey, you better run, dude. Yeah, and like the bug's right there. And his suit's like basically depowered for the most part in that sequence. So I think the second time, I think the first time it's like, yeah, like the thing is, we all like, oh, he has superpowered or like had a weapon or whatever, but we know how to handle ourselves. The thing is, like people could freeze up, and especially for Jaime, like he's only 22 years old, and went to college, and I don't think like he lived in a not so great neighborhood, but I don't think he's like hardened or a tough guy, so. I think him kind of acting the way he did in terms of being gobsmacked, your term for I think that's effective. Like, yeah, he's not like a seasoned like guy that can handle himself. He kind of has to, just roll with the punches, and really the Blue Beetle suit giving him like martial arts skills. Like he's really heavily reliant on that Blue Beetle. Without it, he would just get his ass kicked, most of the time. But no, I think I think like Jaime Reyes being as kind of wet behind the ears, and for the most part of the movie, that I think that's just kind of like that's part of like the comedy, and also like, hey, if an average person were to get like this random superpowered suit, it'll take a while for them to really work out the kinks of it.
So speaking of which, but during the sequence with the death of the father was very heartbreaking to me.
Superman analog right there.
Yeah, a little bit. All these powers, and I couldn't even say them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the best all-time Superman movies
ever. That scene, I was shocked at. Like, I mean, I think when the setup's like, oh, he had a heart attack, and the fact that he had a second one, and he died right in front of his daughter. Man, that's probably one of the there's like George Lopez, the highlight character. That was like the highlight scene because like, oh, this is real emotional drama. It's not just like, oh, this is a cool action sequence.
The house burning behind him. It's really well composed.
Yeah, and the fact that like afterwards the family's just barely holding together, but the Nana just steps up. It's like,
We cried later.
yeah, yeah, and that's like, man, that's I feel like that's very much speaks to the cult, the heritage. I feel like there's probably for a lot of Latino families or people that watch this movie, they'll like really relate to that.
Yeah, the matriarchs are very strong in the Latino families, from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, also, of course, we just like kind of geek out about the tech for a moment there. So we get to the essentially the Beetle cave. I forget what we called Blue Beetle's lair. I don't know if it's just the Beetle cave or what.
Well, let's just go with Blue Beetle HQ.
Sure, HQ. So, we have the Beetle ship,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the Beetle tech. I mean, I love the I love that it's so 80s based. So we have like a retrofitted power glove that has like a hard light function. So it can create constructs like through energy of like hands and shields and stuff. We have
Yeah,
the classic suits in there, which look flawlessly brought right off the page.
and like when Jaime wears Ted's clothes,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a
Probably from JLI.
yeah, it's like a tracksuit, like
Mm-hmm.
very 80s tracksuit.
Oh yeah. We have like the rainbow Gatling gun, beetle bombs, like a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, of course, also Rudy being able to drive the Beetle ship, which I'm sure for him is a dream come true.
Man, Rudy as a character, like it's George Lopez just knocks it out of the park. I love his obsession with his Tacoma, or as he calls it, the taco,
Yep.
and just the way he like operates technology. You just have to kick it a few times and then it works.
I know. I love that. I'll just like I love how it kind of works elsewhere too. Just like kick it a few times and it'll.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much like again as they kind of describe in the movie. He's kind of like a Latino Doc Brown,
Yeah.
to some degree. Yeah, and also they had some nice moments too when they kind of like talked to him on the roof and everything. He kind of ushered him into like the superhero dumb. Which I gotta be honest though, the hesitation I have with this is not hesitation. It's like the gripe that I have with this movie, and I understand the origin movie sometimes you have to get to this point. It's more like sequel territory. But I just wish we could cut out the middleman. It's like Green Lantern all over again to some degree. It's like why can't we have our heroes save people in these DC origin movies? Okay, we get. I'm
Like,
not saying we don't ever get it. Man of Steel had it, I know, but
uh,
I'm just saying, like Green Lantern, like he saves people with the race car track, and not you can't count just saving the immediate loved ones. I'm talking, you got to save some average shit. You got to save
it,
some strangers.
it is interesting that like very few superhero movies nowadays will have the superhero be like their traditional superhero, like in a day to day, like the like you. I think the part of it's like the superheroes that do like they fight a mugger, they stop a bank robbery and all that. Like it's usually more characters that don't have powers or their powers are very minimal. So I think for Blue Beetle, like with him having the heightened powers, it's kind of hard to do regular superhero stuff, and it's like he's just cakewalking it through. And also probably like I see your point where it's like it would have been cool in the middle or at the end. It's like maybe they would have tried to like maybe the family's hiding in like in the house and the keys and like court forces were going through, and then maybe like Jaime would have been there and saved like not just his family but the keys community.
Yeah. Let's see. But yeah, no, I sorry. Yeah, I still wish I'm dying to see heroes go on patrol, man. Like so rarely do we do it.
I think part of it is that like the thing is when we think about the traditional tropes where you're talking about where like the superhero he has like a headquarters lair, he's got like a police person that he talks to, he has a rose gallery, he has a city, his supporting cast. Like very few superheroes have all those like elements, and superheroes that have those elements are the classic superheroes like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Flash, and all that. And I think when you get to the more like B, C, D, or even F list like superheroes, like they're characters that are just supporting characters in team books and will like show up in like random side issues or annuals, but they don't have like a mythos or like a world lore that's developed enough to have them be to do traditional superhero stuff. I mean, you can invent it in like other media, but um, I guess if there's not sort of that back history, you kind of just have to make the superhero a little bit more, high skill action adventure. But yeah, it would be cool for. It'd be nice to see more superheroes do like patrol at night. They hear something in the radio. I probably might see that with Spider Man 4, whenever that comes out. But yeah, that would be cool to have that more often.
All right. So, so let's see. So at the end of the movie,
Mhm.
so Jaime, he gets the girl. He presumably there's a presumed end to his money issues because he's got essentially it ended up just like that telenovela to some degree. I'm sure he's not going to be hounding her for money left and right, but the communities come together. They're going to rebuild the house. We have the new
Oh,
blue taco.
did you not get like Encanto vibes whenever you saw the community?
Yeah, there's an Encanto vibe. Yeah, there it is.
I mean that's probably realistic. Like
It is. People are going to come
yeah,
together in a community like
yeah,
that. Of
and
course, they're
also
going to
like
help
I
out.
also whenever when Jaime was like at death's door and he sees his dad, that seems beautiful. I really appreciate. I love like Jaime reaching out and touching the Blue Beetle, like the David, painting or touching God. That was cool. Although when I saw the dad, with all the candles around him, it's like, man, this is gonna be Coco vibes.
Oh yeah.
Just someone pops up with a guitar and sings. Anyway.
Okay, so let's see. So yeah, so we do that. We can end on a happy note of like, okay, he's going around. He's kind of warmed up to the Blue Beetle thing, and then we have our post credit scene. We have Ted Cord being alive. So we reveal Ted Cord is indeed just missing, and he is alive. Probably uncast because we don't see his face, but he's alive.
Mhm. Yeah, so actually, I just read the other day that the director, Angel Manuel Soto, the director for the Blue Beetle, he mentioned that his fan cast with Ted Cord would is Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah.
So I wonder for the initial rumors, maybe it's like, oh, it'd be cool. Like I would love Jason Sudeikis to play, and then like maybe that kind of went to the grapevine. But depending on how things shake out, it would be interesting for.
Not like he's busy right now.
Well, because the thing is like he's born 75, so he's going to turn 50 when Superman Legacy comes out. So whenever he like suits up as like Ted, he's going to be like on the older end, and I guess like I wonder how blue like whoever the cast is Booster Gold going to be. Is there going to be like a 10, 15 year difference between him?
Well, Booster Gold time travels though.
No, but like Blue Beat, like excuse me, Booster Gold himself, the actor who plays him, like you kind of want him to be somewhat like similar age to Ted, contemporaries and whatnot. Although it might be interesting to where.
Well, I mean, Snakes looks good for his age. He could play a little younger too.
Yeah, I guess that Paul Rudd has played as Ant Man from.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's
I
fair.
don't know. I mean, you look at Sudeikis. I don't know. I mean, I could buy him definitely at least 10 years younger. I mean, maybe 15 most.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the second post credit scene was the classic Mexican B character. I'm trying to remember the.
Yeah, we had like this stop motion. I did not get what the post credit scene was, to be frank. You had like the stop motion thing. I think we saw in the cartoon earlier in the movie. I felt like a bit of like a jip at the end. I felt.
So hold on, I think I'm trying to remember what he.
I wasn't expecting the moon or anything, but I was just curious. I wonder what the heck we're gonna see. I wonder if who knows.
So that's like so do you know that what that particular character is the relevance of that particular character or
Who?
that was in the TV? So I'm trying to find it. Like hold on, Oh, Chess Burrito. So Chess Burrito is like this, like you know, superhero, that's popular in Mexico, and he's actually inspiration for Bumblebee Man in The Simpsons.
Oh,
Yes,
huh.
that's where that character is from.
Okay.
Yeah, so like he's like kind of like he's kind of was like a famous like superhero cartoon character for kids, and so like Rudy's playing that on the intercoms, and then the second one we see him is just like continuing that gag. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, a few comments here we should read off. Code Geass anime fans. Seth MacFarlane should play Ted Cord. I adore Seth MacFarlane. I know a lot of people. There's this one comment. I don't know if it was Code Geass or not, but I remember there was someone kept mentioning Seth MacFarlane for Adam Warlock. Mainly in the Geekvolution kind of circles there, and that was always look. I adore more so Seth MacFarlane the man than the. Here's the thing, but when he was actively involved in Family Guy, I loved it, But at a certain point, basically after 2012, after Ted, after he did Ted, and he started doing the movies, and eventually the Orville, you'll notice that's when the decline really started on Family Guy. That's when basically things became just intolerable, and he just basically came in, did the voice, but he's not in the room creatively anymore. So Seth MacFarlane,
Seth MacFarlane got too big for his britches. He's a big Hollywood man now. He can't focus on his little niche cartoon.
Yep. But that's the thing. He did. You're right. He kind of became essentially he became too big to fail. I mean that in the sense of like he had there not been a strike. That's the thing. Essentially, he by self admission is like, look, yeah, Family Guy has declined. I wouldn't blame. I'm surprised that we're still on. I'm surprised they haven't canceled us. And it's sort of thing like, well, I'm not going to cancel my own show, so they're going to have to cancel us first.
You know what's surprising? What's more surprising? That American guy, the American Dad is still like. I have no
same principle.
Yeah. No, but no, I think I would, if not Jason Sudeikis. Jason is a great choice for Ted. I think Jason Bateman to continue on the Jason, track. I think Jason Bateman would be an interesting Blue Beetle. I think he could definitely play the mild manner, aspect.
I mean, sure, but I think you're running into the same issue as like Sudeikis, where it's going to be like an age thing with people.
How old is? Yeah,
I'm saying he's probably roughly the same age. Plus they were co-stars in the Horrible Bosses. I imagine they're probably the same age.
Oh yeah, Jason Bateman is older than Sudeikis. So
yeah, there you go. Or here's what you can do: you have Dan Garrett played by Jason Bateman, Jason Sudeikis as Ted Cord.
That wouldn't be bad. I wouldn't mind that. Yeah, I think probably it's gonna be some
Let's see, on the Jason track. Let's get Jason Marsdale in there.
No, let's get Jason Segel as Ted Cord.
Well, I mean, again, we keep running to the same age thing, but still, all these good, talented Jason actors just.
Jason Segel should be on the. He was born in 1980, so he is going to be 55 in 2025. So
there you go. I guess. Yeah, I guess Segel.
Yeah, we'll have a very tall Blue Beetle in the DCU. Jason Segel is.
He is. I wonder if Jason can do action because he's usually not really the most athletic,
I really like. I know he can do drama really well. I see.
We turned Paul Rudd into a superhero, so what do I know?
Well, I mean, like, have you heard or seen Winning Time?
I'm sorry, what?
So there's a show on HBO called Winning Time: The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. It's based on a book that.
Yeah, I saw the advertising for it. I haven't watched it.
So Jason Segel's in the show.
Huh.
Yeah, he plays the second head coach. You'll recognize him.
Have you seen him in Shrinking?
I have not.
He's really good in Shrinking.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Not as good as Harrison Ford though. He was really good in Shrinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's any. Okay, Dan Aykroyd is Dan Garrett.
The nominee.
I'd go for it.
Honestly, Dan Aykroyd would have been a good Ted Cord.
That's the thing. He would have been, the younger years. But yes,
I think for Ted Cord, you need an actor who can pull out the mild banner nerdy. It's kind of like
the thing, as George Lopez says in the movie, Blue Beetle has a sense of humor about him. It was funny.
Yeah. I think so you kind of have to go for a more comedic actor. I think this probably, you know what? Now that I think of it, I think for all your things about like like the humor of it, I think the movie's probably like that. So that way, when Ted Kord shows up and is like his usual like Blue Beetle self in like JLI days, like it's not like it doesn't feel off. The movie's trying to
But
have
even so, they're playing the long game on that when they probably shouldn't have, though. It's the thing. It's like we're doing reverse Aquaman. Aquaman was like, we don't know if we're getting another one, so we could cram it all in one movie. Where we should have like instead of like, yeah, we're gonna get another movie, of course.
I mean, you don't know whether the movie will be successful or not. So I mean, that's just the risk you take. I feel like for this, it's like you wanted to be a little more just focused on Jaime and his origin. So having Ted Kord be in it would probably kind of like it would take focus away from Jaime and be like Jaime and Ted. Rather, it should be it's Jaime's movie. And I think when Ted shows up, like it should be that Ted is supporting to Jaime rather than Jaime and Ted are like co-leads or whatever. But
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, I think it's about it. So let's just take a moment to thank our lovely commenters, which includes Code Geass Anime Fan. So I want to thank Rohit Dar for stopping by.
You're welcome.
All right. So yeah, I guess in closing, just that brings us to the end of the Blue Beetle. Again, overall, I mean, look, overall, I don't think we have anything really truly bad to say about the movie. Just like maybe some directions, we kind of wish it could have taken, or maybe things we could have fine tuned here and there. Again, minimally, the OMAC thing. Um, but yeah, it was. I mean, look, it was. I think it's kind of the refreshing course of kind of course that DC needs to take. I just hope that again, I don't think any of us still know like where Blue Beetle is going to fall. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter at the moment. Just like even though we can't seem to say like, okay, this is going to be in the DCU going forward in this big grand plan that we have, because this one's like on the fringes and kind of from the old guard. We don't know, but I think right now the bigger concern is like, okay, we got to get Superman right, and that's going to be the tide that raises all ships. Should it go well? So that's kind of where all the focus is
But
going right now.
but ultimately, at the end of the day, we got to assess the movie just on its own. And for my part, I think it's a good time to watch and good time to watch, with friends and family. And I think, the cast is very fun, very charming. And I hope to eventually, see them in some form, some continuation, one form or another. And I think the critical reception to it being positive, and while the box office is not there, unfortunately, and unfortunate circumstances with the strikes and all that, no promotion from the actors, I think this probably will get better reception, from audiences and as well as comic book people when it gets onto like digital DVD and like streaming. I think this, even this movie doesn't light up the world, but I think it's a good solid, 7.5 out of 10. And I think it's well worth your time. You'll
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, folks, at the end of the day, it's like, you know what? There are a lot of Batman movies, a lot of Superman movies, but you know what? There's not a lot of Blue Beetle movies. So give it a watch.
Yeah, for all the things that could have gone wrong, like this is a cohesive, not blatantly bad or misconstrued movie. This movie knows what it is, and for Blue Dragon, it maybe could have gone a little bit farther, but I think for what it does well for what it is. And ultimately, I think for people that are evaluating the superhero genre and superhero movies, I think we need to have a perspective about that. If a certain movie isn't great, if it's good or decent, that is still worthwhile as watching a great film. Well, if you have opinions about it could have been greater, that's one thing. But I think movies that are good and decent, should merit your attention and dollars. So, if you haven't seen Blue Beetle, I mean, hopefully you probably haven't paid too much attention to Spoilercast. I endeavor you to watch it, enjoy it, and if you want to watch it again in streaming, do so. And I think this is a movie that is fun. It's very much, if you like Shazam, I think you would appreciate this, but it's not as good as Shazam in my view. I think it's like slightly above the mid tier of the DCU movies. But I think in light of that, I think it's good on its own merits. The villains are nothing to write about, but I think the family dynamic is kind of what carries the movie. So.
All right, so I want to again, thanks for tuning in, folks. Have a great evening as well. Go Yes Anime Fan, and see you at the next one.
Batman's a fascist.